The roar of the engine echoed through the streets, turning heads as she rode past. Dressed in black leather, her helmet reflecting the city lights, she looked like a force of nature. But beneath the tough exterior was a woman with a story of struggle, resilience, and a fight against something much bigger than herself. This is the journey of Maya Carter, a black woman biker who refused to back down in the face of racism, and, in doing so, became a symbol of hope for so many. Maya wasn't always the fearless rider people now admired. She had grown up in a small southern town where tradition ran deep, and change was often met with resistance. As a child, she had always been drawn to motorcycles. The sound, the power, the freedom. It was something she couldn't explain but felt deep in her soul. But in a world that constantly tried to put limits on her, riding seemed like an impossible dream. When she first expressed her love for bikes, people laughed. "That's not for girls, especially not for girls like you," they'd say. But Maya had never been one to listen to doubters. She worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and bought her first motorcycle at 19. It wasn't brand new. Far from it. It was an old, beat-up cruiser with more rust than shine. But to her, it was everything. The first time she rode through town, she felt eyes on her, some filled with curiosity, others with disapproval. She didn't care. The wind in her face, the grip of the handlebars, the rumble of the engine beneath her. It was freedom. It was power. But not everyone saw it that way. It started with small things, side-eye glances at stoplights, sneers when she parked outside diners. Then, it escalated. Some people believed she was stepping into a world where she didn't belong. They'd mutter under their breath, make crude remarks, even try to intimidate her on the road. But Maya never flinched. One night, after a long ride, she pulled into a gas station outside the city. As she stepped off her bike, she noticed a group of men watching her. They weren't just looking, they were waiting. One of them smirked. "That your bike, sweetheart? Or did your boyfriend let you borrow it?" Maya tightened her grip on the fuel pump, refusing to let anger show on her face. "It's mine," she said calmly. The man scoffed. "Ain't seen too many like you on a ride like that. You sure you know what you're doing?" She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "Why don't you find out?" A challenge. A test. She could see it in their eyes. They wanted her to back down, to shrink. But Maya had never been good at shrinking. She finished fueling up, put on her helmet, and started her bike. The deep, powerful growl of the engine cut through the night air like a warning. Without another word, she revved the throttle and disappeared into the darkness, leaving them in a cloud of dust and disbelief. But that was only the beginning. The more Maya rode, the more resistance she faced. Even within the biker community, acceptance wasn't immediate. Some clubs turned her away. Others refused to acknowledge her presence. But she wasn't looking for their approval. She was looking for her own path. Then came the night that changed everything. A charity ride for veterans was being held just outside the city. Bikers from all over were coming together for a good cause. Maya wanted to be part of it. She signed up, showed up, and lined up with the rest. But as she revved her engine, a man stepped forward and shook his head. "Sorry, we don't think this ride is for you." A chill ran down Maya's spine. She could feel all eyes on her, some sympathetic, others indifferent. She took a deep breath. "And why is that?" No one answered. They didn't need to. For a moment, she considered leaving. It would have been easier to turn around, to let them have their moment while she rode alone. But then she remembered why she started, why she fought, and why she would never stop. So she did what she did best. She rode, right past them, right into that charity ride, right into history. What happened next? Well, that's where things get interesting. As Maya sped past the line of riders, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with determination. The sound of engines filled the air, a rolling thunder of bikers moving together for a cause that should have united them. And yet, even here, she felt like an outsider. Some riders stared in silence, their faces unreadable beneath helmets and sunglasses. Others shook their heads, muttering to themselves. But she kept her grip firm on the handlebars, her gaze locked on the road ahead. She had just as much right to be here as anyone else. At first, no one rode beside her. The distance between her and the rest of the pack felt deliberate, like an unspoken message that she wasn't welcome. But then, as they hit the highway, something changed. A woman on a red Harley slowly pulled up next to her. She didn't say anything, just gave Maya a small nod before matching her speed. Then another rider joined in, and another, until finally, Maya was no longer riding alone. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was something. The ride lasted hours, winding through highways and small towns, raising money for veterans who had given everything for their country. Maya focused on the road, on the rhythm of the ride, on the reason they were all here. By the time they reached their destination, a large field where the bikers were gathering for speeches and food, the tension had begun to ease. Or so she thought. As Maya parked her bike, she overheard a conversation nearby. A group of men stood together, arms crossed, talking in hushed voices. She just forced her way in, one of them grumbled. This isn't her scene. She's just looking for attention, another added, trying to make a statement. Maya clenched her jaw. She had fought too hard to let words like these get under her skin. But before she could turn away, another voice spoke up. Maybe she's just a biker like the rest of us. The men fell silent. The voice had come from an older man with a long gray beard, his vest covered in patches from decades of rides. He stepped forward, looking directly at Maya. You rode hard today, didn't back down. His eyes held something different, respect. That's what matters. The tension in the air didn't completely disappear, but in that moment, Maya knew she had made an impact. As the sun set, she sat alone on a bench, watching the crowd. Bikers laughed, shared stories, and bonded over their love for the road. She had spent so long proving she belonged that she had almost forgotten why she loved riding in the first place. It wasn't about being accepted. It was about the freedom, the feeling of being alive, the connection between rider and machine. Then, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see the woman from earlier, the one on the red Harley. She had taken off her helmet, revealing dark curls and sharp brown eyes. You handled yourself well today, she said, sitting down next to Maya. I'm Tasha. Maya. Tasha smirked. I know, you made quite an entrance. Maya chuckled. Seemed like the only way in. Tasha leaned back, stretching her legs out. Yeah, some people don't like change, but things don't change unless someone forces them to. She looked at Maya, her expression thoughtful. You're not the first black woman to ride, but you might be the first some of these guys have ever seen in a setting like this. And that makes them uncomfortable. Maya sighed. I'm not trying to make people uncomfortable. I just want to ride. Tasha nodded. And that's exactly why you have to keep doing it. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she wasn't fighting this battle alone. The ride home was different. The road stretched ahead, open and endless, the wind cool against her skin. But something lingered in her mind, a feeling that this wasn't over. The resistance, the doubt, the unwelcome stares, none of it would disappear overnight. And she was right. Days later, Maya pulled into her usual coffee shop, her favorite spot to sit and plan her next ride. As she walked inside, she noticed a group of men sitting at a table near the window. A few of them were from the charity ride. They stopped talking the moment they saw her. One of them, a tall man with a leather vest, leaned back in his chair and smirked. You're making quite the name for yourself, he said. Maya grabbed her coffee and turned to face him. Just riding like everyone else. He chuckled. You sure about that? He gestured around the cafe. Word travels fast. Some folks think you're trying to change things. His tone was casual, but there was something underneath it, a challenge. Maya met his gaze. Maybe things need to change. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then, the man simply nodded. Guess we'll see about that. Maya walked out without another word, but her heart was pounding. This was bigger than just one ride. This was bigger than just her. The next weekend, she was back on the road, but this time she wasn't alone. Tasha was with her, and so were others, riders who had seen her, heard her story, and wanted to be part of something different. As they rode through town, people watched, some with curiosity, some with admiration, and some with the same old resistance. But Maya didn't care, because change was coming. And she was leading the way. Maya could feel the energy shifting. Every time she rode, she noticed more people taking interest. Some just watched from a distance, curiosity in their eyes. Others approached her, asking questions about her bike, her journey, her reasons for riding. And then there were those who still saw her as an outsider, clinging to the old way of thinking. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya and Tasha pulled up to a small gathering of bikers outside a roadside diner. One man, the same one who had challenged her at the coffee shop, looked up from his drink. This time, there was no smirk, no dismissive tone. Instead, he stood up and gestured toward a nearby bike. "That yours?" he asked, his voice even. Maya nodded. He walked around it slowly, inspecting the details. Finally, he glanced back at her. "You ride hard?" Maya met his gaze, holding steady. "Always." A slow nod. Then, without another word, he stepped aside, making room for her and Tasha at the table. It wasn't a grand moment. There was no applause, no sudden acceptance from everyone, but it was something, a small shift. A door cracked open. As the night went on, stories were exchanged. Tasha laughed with a group of riders, while Maya listened to an older biker talk about the first time he rode across the country. Slowly, barriers were coming down. People were starting to see her not as a challenge, but as a rider, one of them. It wasn't until Maya was getting ready to leave that something unexpected happened. The man who had once doubted her, the one who had warned her she was making a name for herself, walked up and held out his hand. Maya hesitated for just a moment before shaking it. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "Neither are you," she said with a small smile. As Maya and Tasha rode off into the night, the road stretched ahead, endless and full of possibilities. The fight wasn't over. There would always be people who resisted change, who believed some spaces weren't meant for people like her. But Maya had never been one to wait for approval. She rode for herself, for every Black woman who had been told she didn't belong, for anyone who had ever felt like an outsider in a world that wasn't ready for them. And as the wind rushed past her, carrying her forward, she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't riding alone anymore.